She's the outspoken host of Justice with Judge Jeanine on the Fox News Channel, and she joins me next on Significant Insights. Hello, and thanks for joining me. Good to have you with us on the program. My guest today has really had a fascinating career. In fact, she has had several careers. Judge Jeanine Pirro grew up in the small town of Elmira, New York, and upon graduation from law school, she started working as an assistant district attorney in Westchester County, New York. That was back when there were very few women in those positions. Well, she then rose to become the first female district attorney for Westchester County, and she also became the first female judge in that county, and now she's a legal analyst and television personality. She hosts the weekly series Justice with Judge Jeanine on the Fox News Channel. I had an opportunity to talk with Judge Jeanine in February during the National Religious Broadcasters Convention in Nashville. We talked about her early years and her passion for justice. Thank you for taking time to be with me on the program today.
My pleasure.
This is,
I didn't expect it, but I appreciate it.
I want to go back to Jeanine, to who you were before all of this.
Grew up in small town America, and it was a very blue-collar town, kind of a farm area. And it was very simple. I mean, life was simple, you know. Everybody went to church. We, believed in God, and education was important, and you could buy a decent tomato. All that good stuff.
Sort of grassroots America, what America has been about for 200 and something years.
Without a doubt. And, so when people say you're from New York, they don't get that there are parts of New York that are very, pro-Second Amendment, pro-religion, and those are my roots. And I grew up in a family where religion and family and country was prized. My dad was a veteran, my grandfather was a veteran, and, I had a really basic, grounded, foundation in America and who we are. And so my moral clarity stems from growing up in that small town America. And for years I owned pigs in Westchester County, which is where I live, which is this affluent suburban area. And
that was quite a jump, wasn't it? From I want to go back to Elmira for just a minute, because blue-collar Democrat. Like a lot of us. I grew up as a Democrat because at that time the Democratic Party represented who we were, a blue-collar family, hard workers, and felt that the Democratic Party really was a conservative party at the time.
And that's why, we hear about the Reagan Democrats, who saw someone who had their message. And I think the Democrats of today are totally different from the Democrats that Elmira was so many years ago and what you're talking about. I don't know what the Democratic Party is about today. I really can't speak to it, but what I can tell you, it's not about the truth. The Democratic Party, whether it's about, this academic kind of, elitism, a sense that, we know what's good for you. We know what you should do, what you should drink, what you should carry, what you should eat. I don't know what to call them. It's not the Democrat Party of my parents or what I grew up with in small town America in Elmira, New York. It is this extremist left. It's more than liberal, it's left. And when someone running in the Democratic Party admits he's a socialist, you say to yourself, then it isn't what we thought it was. The Republican Party is the party that has, hope and has that safety net. But, you don't just give someone a fish, you teach them how to fish. And that's the problem. We are headed in the wrong direction. And I think, honestly, the two-party system is over. I think that what Bernie Sanders, and whether he goes anywhere or not, and Donald Trump have proven to the establishment is get out of the way. This one hand washes the other. And, Jerry, the thing that makes me crazy, sanctuary cities. You've got illegals.
They're illegal, yeah.
They're illegals committing crimes, who are not being sent out to ICE for deportation. They're not being detained and they're not being prosecuted. So then you get all the Republicans after the Kate Steinle murder in San Francisco. They say, this is wrong, we're not going to fund them anymore. And then in the quiet of the night, they pass the budget. You know what? Shame on them. Shame on them. Do they represent you and me? I don't know if they represent anyone out there, but that's not my party either. You know, it's the one hand washes the other. You take care of me, I'll take care of you. I'll pass this if you pass that. And you know what? I've only got 2 years in Congress, so I need to lobby, and the lobby is put in the legislature. This is all wrong. I am so disappointed.
When did you go to law school? What brought about that decision?
I used to watch Perry Mason, and, you know, Perry Mason always got to the truth, you know. And by the way, you remember Hamilton Burr? He was the DA in Perry Mason. I don't know how Hamilton Burr kept getting reelected because he lost every case to Perry Mason.
Yeah.
But for me, the underdog was not the accused. The underdog was the victim of crime. And when I was a little girl, I decided I'd be a lawyer. Never stopped. Everyone said, you're a woman, you shouldn't be a lawyer. I was in that, you know, forging generation. And I did high school in 3 years, and I was in a rush. I've always been in a rush. And I got out of law school and you know, began as an assistant DA in Westchester County in New York.
So you started as a DA?
As an assistant DA. And I started the first domestic violence unit in the nation.
Really?
At the time, and I don't know if most of the viewers even know this, but it wasn't a crime to beat, stab, or brutalize your wife. It was only a crime in just about every state in this country if you killed her. And so the laws started changing, and as soon as it changed in New York, I went to my boss, I said, you know, the law just changed, I'd like to start a domestic violence unit. And I ended up being funded by the Department of Justice. It was the first in the nation, you know, in the first 4. And that was my passion, the underdog, the person who was victimized by someone in power. And, you know, that's how I started, you know, getting out there and being heard.
Yeah.
And I realized that there are so many people who are voiceless, who are silent, and, you know, it translates so well into the world that I'm in now, you know, the silent majority, the voiceless. But for me, it was the victim of crime, the person who never asked to be in the criminal justice system. You know, it's the criminal that put him in there.
Yeah.
And so my passion was for that underdog, and my fight was in that arena. And I then was elected county judge. I was the first woman county
When you
judge.
started as a DA, as an assistant DA,
Yeah.
wasn't that unusual for a woman?
Oh yeah, they put me
Because
right in
that,
appeals.
you know, in those days, I mean, I don't.
Yeah, no, it was a
but I
while
mean, in
ago.
those days,
No, I
there weren't
remember-
a lot of female DAs.
There was one other, and she was in appeals, so they put me in appeals. I said, wait a minute, I'm here to try cases. You know, I thought I was Perry Mason. Obviously not.
Did it strike you at that time as unusual? I mean, that
Yeah,
gosh,
no.
I've really achieved something.
But
here.
I understood the world. You see, I never had a chip on my shoulder. I always approach things with a sense of humor. You know,
Yeah.
You're not going to win with a chip on your shoulder. So I'll tell you how I started trying cases. They said women cannot try cases. I said, okay. So all the guys in appeals would want to go out on Thursday nights or Saturday nights, and I'd say to them, can I do your court tonight? And they'd say, no, you know, you can't, I have a trial. I said, well, try me. I'll put your name on the file. No one will know. There weren't computers then. Everybody just wrote their name on a file. So I went out, started trying cases. And then my boss, about a year later, heard from some judge in a local court. These are all local circuit courts. This Jeanine Pirro's doing pretty well. And I got reamed. And I said to my boss, I said, you know, I learned by reading all of your transcripts, and that's how I learned how to try a case.
So you're a diplomat. I mean, yeah.
Or a sly fox, as he called me. I remember homicide. Everybody got on a list in the DA's office to do homicide duty. And I got called in, and I was told, you know, Jeanine, you don't have to be on homicide duty. You know, you're a woman, it's okay. I said, no, but I want to. And they said, no, you're not going to. And so I went back and forth and convinced them to let me do it. And after I did that, after I was the first woman to try a murder case because women couldn't go for the jugular, you know, it kind of opened the path. And then when I became the first woman district attorney in a county of 1 million people, When they said she's not tough enough, it broke a lot of barriers and ceilings, but it wasn't about that. I was on a mission to do good and to make sure that people who committed crimes and victimized others paid for it. And there is violent crime, but there is also economic crime that can be as violent as a homicide. Example, a senior citizen in a home that's paid for, who gets scammed and then has to end up moving out of her home. That's an economic fraud that is horrific. And it was the best job in the world. Wow. But after 30 years as a prosecutor, a judge, and a DA, I said, you know what? It's time to move on. So I did.
Why Judge Jeanine left her groundbreaking job on the bench and how she ended up on television right after the break.
If you think that a courtroom is a place where truth is unearthed, you're wrong. Because as a judge, the first thing you hear is how to suppress evidence.
Welcome back. Today I'm talking with Jeanine Pirro, host of Justice with Judge Jeanine on the Fox News Channel. Judge Jeanine has broken a lot of ground in her career. She was the first female district attorney in Westchester County, New York, and the first female judge in that county as well. But she found sitting on the bench to be less rewarding than she had expected. I had a niece who was a litigation attorney. She said, I got into this for truth. But what I found, it was not so much about truth as it was manipulation. Did you find that to be true, and how did you deal with it?
I've written 4 books, and your niece is absolutely right. If you think that a courtroom is a place where truth is unearthed, you're wrong. Because as a judge, the first thing you hear is how to suppress evidence. I can sit there from the bench and say, but it's the truth. I don't care if the cop did it right or wrong. The proof is in the pudding. And it's almost a manipulation. It is a suppression of evidence, suppression of statements. A guy with a rap sheet a mile long goes before the jury dressed up as though he's never committed a crime. Victims are trashed and dragged over the coals. I fought legislatively. I went to Albany, which is the capital of New York, and fought to change the laws. It's not about truth and justice. But what you can do is, as much as possible, level that playing field, and that's what I did. So a woman who's a victim of a rape can't be forced to take a polygraph any more than a guy who is charged with rape. You cannot say to a woman, you really are kind of a loose woman, and so this guy would expect that he would be able to have sex. I mean, all those crazy things, we slowly remedy them to get to the crux and to get to the truth. But make no mistake, the courtroom is not where we unearth the truth.
But from the bench, you can
look
for the truth.
What was more satisfactory was being DA. That's why I left the bench.
Really?
As a judge, I was bound by precedent. So I will never forget, there was a drug case that was brought before me, and multi-million-dollar cocaine. And there was an undercover, and they came in with the AR-15s and everything else because there was so many drugs, so much that was brought into my courtroom. And I had to dismiss the charge. It was one of the things that took me off the bench when I said,
Well,
this isn't for me. I had to suppress the evidence because, pursuant to precedent, the court said if the cops do this and this, it's not admissible. So I didn't have a choice. I didn't like it, and then I went back to being DA and changing the law and being an advocate, making a difference, not just being bound by precedent, which is like our Antonin Scalia, who just passed. Everyone said he was an originalist. You have to think what the founding fathers were thinking. You have to read the Constitution strictly. You can't be an advocate on the bench, and I understood that.
Yeah, which is pretty much what the Supreme Court, to some degree, is leading to.
Absolutely. And gay marriage.
To be an advocate, an activist, rather than a constitutionalist.
Exactly. And that's the fight we're in right now. That is the fight that we're in. And whether we wait for the new president, if that's possible, or we risk going along with the president appointing a moderate and, being stuck with that person, it's going to be very difficult because on the one hand, we can lose the election and not have the opportunity to put someone in the Supreme Court. So what do? Do you compromise and take, a moderate?
I want to find out how the transition came about from a DA to a television personality.
Okay, so I after 30 years say I'm going to leave the DA's
30
office.
years.
30 years.
Wow.
Prosecutor, judge, DA, best job in the world, as I've said many times. I ran for Attorney General in New York, and I lost to Andrew Cuomo, the now governor. And New York isn't exactly a red state. And the next day I get a phone call, and my assistant called me and she said to me, there's some Hillary woman. I said, did she give me money? Because I was thanking so many people and I was exhausted. And she said, no. But the next day she came and she said, boss, you need to call this woman. Her name is Hillary Estee McLaughlin. She's the president of Warner Brothers Television.
Wow.
So I call her up and I say, hi, this is Jeanine Pirro. And she said, I just want you to know we're kind of glad you lost. And
Wow.
We've been watching you for a while, and we'd like to do a television show with you. And if I didn't call her directly myself, I would have said it's a joke. And I said, do I need an agent? I was very naive. And she said, no, you got us. You don't need the agent. And I did a syndicated show for which I won an Emmy.
Yeah.
And I was in Chicago for 3 years and loved it. And now I'm working
at the
for
NBC
Fox.
studios
Yes,
there in Chicago,
NBC
downtown
studios.
Chicago.
Yeah, love Chicago. But, and for me, television now is the opportunity for me to tell the truth. And my show initially was supposed to be about justice and crime, justice with Judge Jeanine. But as I looked at the political spectrum of what was going on, there was no truth in politics. And then I started with, radical Islam, the president, Obamacare, Benghazi. And I said, you know what, this is now my wheelhouse. I think the American people deserve the truth, and they're not getting it. So every week I do an opening statement and I talk with evidence supporting my claim about what is going on in terms of recent affairs.
So last question, do we look forward to seeing Judge Jeanine on television for a few years to come? Is that going to continue to be fulfilling for you?
Yeah,
or do you have another season of life that you want to do something else adventurous and exciting?
No more chapters. No more chapters. I love television. I've written 4 books. The last one is about Robert Durst. He killed them all.
Now, you've written a number of books.
Yeah, 4 of them.
4. Yeah.
And the last one, if anyone watched The Jinx, I was the DA that opened that whole case on Robert Durst. I give speeches around the country. I love meeting people around the country. I'm happy. I have 2 great kids. My daughter's a lawyer. My son's in finance. I thank God every day for what I have and what He's allowed me to become and be. I thank God for my mom is still with me, and I'm happy. I'm
Good for you.
truly happy.
I thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with Jeanine Pirro. She takes Democrats and Republicans equally to task on our program, and her opening statements are always thought-provoking and sometimes pretty controversial. You can watch Justice with Judge Jeanine Saturday nights on the Fox News Channel. Final thoughts on thorns in our flesh right after this.
Paul sought God earnestly 3 times, asking God to deliver him from this agent of Satan that was buffeting him.
Welcome back. My conversation with Judge Jeanine highlighted the fact that we can and should expect certain things from our government, like enacting fair legislation, protecting citizens, and punishing criminals. But the government will never be able to solve all of our problems. Even God allows us to have troubles and struggles in our lives, things that the Apostle Paul refers to as thorns in the flesh. Pastor Will Nelken of Trinity Community Church in San Rafael, California, talks more about this in today's Final Thoughts.
Let me share with you a poem I recently read. There was once an oyster whose story I tell, who found that some sand had got into his shell. It was only a grain, but it gave him great pain, for oysters have feelings, although they're so plain. Now did he berate the harsh workings of fate that had brought him to such a deplorable state? Did he curse at the government, cry for election, and claim that the sea should have given him protection? No, he said to himself as he lay on a shell, since I cannot remove it, I shall try to improve it. Now the years have rolled round as the years always do, and he came to his ultimate destiny, stew. And the small grain of sand that had bothered him so was a beautiful pearl, all richly aglow. Now the tale has a moral, for isn't it grand what an oyster can do with a morsel of sand? What couldn't we do if we'd only begin with some of the things that get under our skin? This reminds me of a circumstance in which the Apostle Paul found himself. He had something that had gotten under his skin. Maybe you have something that's under your skin today. I know when I feel like that, I call out to God for help. I ask God if He'll meet my need and set me free. And Paul did that. Paul sought God earnestly 3 times, asking God to deliver him from this agent of Satan that was buffeting him. We don't know if it was a physical malady. Maybe it was an emotional weariness from all of his work and ministry. But whatever it was, God's answer to Paul was, "My grace is sufficient for you." He didn't remove the burden. He didn't remove that grain of irritating sand. But he gave Paul grace to deal with it, to endure it, and to make something good of it. And that is what I hope for you. When those things get under our skin or those people irritate us, we're going to call on God. And it's quite natural to ask God if He would remove the irritating situation, if He would overcome the problem. And God has the power to do that. But sometimes He doesn't choose to. And when He doesn't, I want you to hear the words, "My grace is sufficient for you." His grace is more than enough. It's more than you need to deal with any situation, to endure any irritating circumstance. So if you'll put your trust in God, if you'll receive His grace, you can turn irritants into pearls. Great opportunities of ministry, great opportunities of compassion. Let those things that have hurt you become a service to someone else.
I'd like to say thanks to Pastor Nelken for that really, really good insight. You know, it's interesting because so often as Christians, we want everything to go completely smoothly after we accept Christ, and there is some theology that would tend to suggest that that happens, but the Bible really does not suggest that that happen. In fact, the Bible says that there will be trials, there will be tribulations in our lives. We all want to be dealt with absolutely justly. But the Bible really doesn't say that that's going to happen. In fact, Jesus was not dealt with justly. The disciples, the apostles were not dealt with justly. But finally, God is in control. And the thing that we understand is that God controls our lives, and He allows some of these struggles and difficulties because that makes us, as we go through those, that makes us better people. And one of the things that is absolutely essential in those times is to turn our hearts toward God. Don't back away from God. Don't run away from God. Let that draw you closer to God so He can guide you through those struggles in your life successfully. Thanks for joining me.